are really ambitious and strong people, but sometimes may feel stuck or suffer with depression, anxiety, or even low self-esteem.
Definitely, definitely. So, you know, we're in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic experience. That's what we really wanted to talk about
Yeah.
tonight. So we've noticed within our own practice, I had shared with you the day I talked with you, I said that week alone, I had 2 patients back to back who called in suicidal to the clinic, which is a rarity for my practice.
Right.
So as we're seeing the numbers of anxiety and depression increase, what are some signs that, you know, we need to be looking out for in ourselves, maybe as
Mhm.
family members and friends?
Well, there are lots of signs that you can look out for depression or anxiety, for example. So really you want to look out for things that are different from your normal personality. However your personality is, if it's like out of the ordinary for you for an extended period of time, you may want to start paying attention to that kind of stuff. So if you find yourself, one of the biggest red flags is, which is kind of tricky to figure out right now because we don't really have a choice. But if you find yourself isolating and that's not normal for you, and that just means spending an excessive amount of time alone, and even though we are supposed to be alone together right now, there's still a difference between that and like not even wanting to engage with the people maybe in your own home, or being, you may lose interest in your normal hobbies or activities, the things that were easy for you to do now take all of this like emotional energy and you just can't seem to find it. um Anxiety can just keep you up at night because your brain won't shut off. It feels like it's like running and running and you have these racing thoughts, and no matter how much you try to relax or take your mind off of things, it doesn't seem to, the more you try to relax, it's like the more anxious you get. What else? Your appetite can change, and it can go in either direction for depression or anxiety. You can start eating too much, or especially when you're depressed, sometimes that's when we tend to cling to comfort foods. But you can also be so anxious that you're too nervous to eat. And that can happen too. You can oversleep because you just don't want to deal with the world, or you cannot sleep at all. You can find yourself like snapping at people on accident, and like you're watching yourself doing it and you really don't mean it, but you can't help it just because you're just kind of out of sorts, and you just find yourself not being yourself. And we all have a sense of sadness right now. But if you're more sad, then like if you're sad for an extended period of time and no matter what you do you can't seem to shake it, you might be experiencing depression at this time.
Yeah, yeah. Those are some good tips of things we need to look out for.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Keisha.
Hey.
I want to ask you a question for the parents that may be watching on tonight. What are some things that they should be looking out for in regards to their children, children who may not be processing kind of what's going on and may be feeling anxious and depressed about what's going on? What are some things that parents should be looking out for, and what are some ways they can help their children in this time, this very stressful time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because most parents are worried about their kids because they're probably spending more time than they ever spent with them in their lifetime right now.
Right.
And we don't even have all the answers. Kids usually look to adults for guidance and just a sense of security because, we can give them answers. And it's really hard to like leaders right now because even we don't have all the answers and the information changes so quickly. It can be hard to be, that parental authoritative figure that you're used to being. But kind of like what I was saying about as far as signs to look out for, like yourself and you're not feeling normal. By this age, you probably know your kids pretty well. So you can probably start to see when they're acting different than their normal selves. Like every parent knows, like, when they're just kids just having an off day, but if they are acting out beyond that, then that might be a red flag too. And the younger the kids are, the less language they have to process their emotions. So how we might come home and say, oh, I had a long day. Let me tell you about my day. Can I talk to you? Kids may just show up and be like, Mommy, will you play with me? Or Daddy, will you play with me? And that's their way of like releasing their frustration. And basically that is how they tell you they need to talk or they need to get something off of their chest, because they're not adults and they don't have the language to be like, let me tell you specifically what emotion I'm feeling right here and now and what event exactly brought that on. They'll just say, can we play? So that can be a sign that parents can look at for if they're acting out, kind of, I mean, almost similar signs to adults. If they're acting out more, if they're sleeping more or eating less or crying more often or yelling, snapping more often, or just anything that's not their normal selves that you don't normally see them doing or in ways that you don't normally see them behaving. You can check in with them and ask them, is everything okay? If there's anything they want to talk about. Sometimes they get too nervous to talk about it, so you might have to keep, trying with them until they finally open up. But as long as they feel safe that they can come to you and talk to you about anything, eventually they'll open up to you. So it's a really good practice to keep an open line of communication. Like, our generation probably grew up like not really coming forward to parents, like children are seen and not heard. But this generation might need something a little different, because we probably did not grow up in elementary school with any children committing suicide either.
Right.
So I think kids in their generation, they need to know that even if I did something wrong, Mommy and Daddy are still a safe place for me to come and open up to them. They're not going to stop loving me because I did something bad or I disobeyed. They need to know that they can come to parents with anything, no matter what. And yes, they might get disciplined. They might get in trouble. They still might have some kind of consequence for their actions. That is important for them to experience too. But they also need to know, if there's anybody in the world that will always be there for me no matter what, and I need to talk to somebody, my parents will always be those people for me.
No, that's so good. That was so good. And especially, this is the perfect time, I guess, to build that relationship if you didn't have it with your kid.
Yeah.
To let them know that you're there to listen to them, that you have all the time in the world to listen. We did get a question brought in from one of our followers who wanted to ask for parents, like moms or dads, who they themselves are experiencing like the pressure working at home, now being the teacher, the principal, the school nurse, all of that. What can they do for coping? Because sometimes like the stress, they're not really sure about how to go about doing that to support their children.
Yeah. So no matter what, you always have to try to find a way to take care of yourself. And I know that is easier said than done, especially in
support their children.
Yeah. So no matter what, you always have to try to find a way to take care of yourself. And I know that is easier said than done, especially in times like this. And you may not be able to put yourself first, but at least try to find ways to take a break from it all. Even though you might not have a break during the day, but this quarantine time has made like virtual happy hours really popular. I've joined some myself, and they've been really beneficial. And I'll be honest, like sometimes I haven't really felt like joining them beforehand. Like, oh, it feels like a lot. But afterwards, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I did. Because it took my mind off of the day. It took my mind off of all the stress that you're talking about that parents are under right now. And it gave me a chance to just to like laugh and be silly. And when you're laughing and happy like that, you're releasing endorphins in your brain that, are stress relievers. And even if it's like a minimal distraction, sometimes that's enough. You might not have 2 hours to take off, but if you can spend 30 minutes talking to a friend or playing games or laughing at a TV show or whatever, like do something like that. Anything, like take a bath without your kids, knocking on the door or whatever, like just stay in there and don't come out. Take a bath or take a hot shower. We can't send them to anybody's house right now. But you know, find go in the backyard, something, go in the patio, find somewhere to escape, whether you read a book, your Bible, listen to instrumental music, or I don't know, ratchet hip hop, whatever music, club banging music, whatever, like whatever it takes, like get up and dance, something, find something. And sometimes you can incorporate them. Kids like to see their parents act silly. So if you want to get up and have a little dance party with them, it might just be enough to break the tension in the house with everybody, you know? This is not really what parents can do, but I'm going to say it before I forget because my brain. But something else you can do with your kids, I feel like this is a good time to bring back board games and stuff. And find a new way to connect with your kids. And you know, just to have fun and break up the monotony a little bit.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good. So you already answered one of our questions that we had next. We're going to skip to the next question. As we begin to open up the country and people tend to trickle back into their jobs, into their normal routines, what are some ways we can cope with that stress, the stress of the unknown?
There's been a lot of doom and gloom about the future. So everybody is understandably like anxious about what to expect. It's almost like we can't get a straight answer. We don't have like one unified voice of leadership. So we're kind of being left to our own devices and trying to just figure out what's best for us individually as well as like as a country. So I would say one way to ease some of the stress about baby stepping our way back into society is to don't feel pressure to run out just because everybody else is running out, and also don't don't get tricked by your boredom at home, like, oh yeah, I need to go outside. Like, keep in mind that your safety comes first. I mean, not literally go outside, but like going back to bars and movie theaters and stuff like that, because even though it might be, you know, it might suck to be inside now, it will suck even more if you go out into those public places and then you get sick. That's a whole nother burden. Or your family or your baby gets sick. That's a whole nother burden you have to worry about. So I would say be anxious for nothing. Take your time and listen to the real experts, not people who feel like they are experts because they are very popular or influential. Listen to people like Dr. Fauci and the CDC. There's another doctor on a family medicine doctor on Instagram that I can't think of his name, but he had an interview with Dr. Fauci. Like, listen to the people who have nothing to gain politically.
Right.
So try to follow the science and try to follow the medicine. And even those people, as bad as things are, they still offer hope. Like, they let us know, like, if we can try to be disciplined for a little longer and follow these rules that we have, keep your 6 feet distance or more if you can, because there's even conflicting information about how close you can be to somebody before, you know, you actually contract the virus. So as far away as possible, limit how many times you're going to the grocery store, wherever, you know, that you can't go out. Wash your hands immediately, like in between activities, not just, well, I'm about to eat, I wash my hands and then I'm gonna go, I don't know, feed the baby. Like, wash your hands after you eat too. And you know, like, just try to implement those things and remember that this will end. It will end. It doesn't feel like it, and we don't know when it will end, but just keep in mind that it will end, and do your part. Do what you can to try to stay as safe as possible.
Yeah, that's so true, because I think people are getting antsy, and people were getting antsy week 1. So, so just being able to kind of sit tight and definitely, as you said, listening to sound advice like through the CDC. And one thing that we really have been doing, like on our YouTube channel, we've been updating videos about every week or so, providing information that, you know, we're researching, that we're actually hearing, again, from non-biased sites, so we can stay up to date on what's going on. Okay. So
I was also going to say, the Houston mayor, he has like live press conferences too. That can be another source of like sound information that people can get, good guidance from as well. Sometimes they're sometimes on Instagram Live, but try to follow like your state and local. I know a lot of state and local are like, oh, it's open back up and everything, but try to listen to the people that are cautious because there's a reason that they are.
Yep, definitely, definitely. Now, kind of coming back to this group therapy session that we need to have here. Okay, those who just joined, we have Keisha here on the line, who is a therapist, and she's going to be giving us some useful tips that we can do to get through all this COVID-19 business over the next few weeks.
Yes.
And months, maybe. So we'll see.
Maybe.
We'll see. So, in terms of coping mechanisms, coping strategies, what can we do for those who are still at home, and even for those that now are trickling back into the workplace?
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard and that I've been using too is like try to limit how much you listen to and consume on COVID-19. Like try to link, because as much as we want to be informed, there is a such thing as too much information, and that can inadvertently drive up your anxiety and also drive up your depression, because the more bad news you hear reported, the more cases you hear reporting, like it sounds like this is never going to end, or it sounds like, like everything is wrong, and there is no hope at the end of the tunnel. So try to limit exactly how much time you're spending listening or reading up on it and talking about it and stuff like that. So that would be one way to cope. I would say, like there has been a little bit of like, especially like social media naturally comes with like a comparison part where constantly, because everybody's showing the best parts of their life. So when you see that, you feel like you're behind and you're not enough. And my brain I just lost it. Where was I going with that? I told you it happens. That's why I have to say stuff when I think of it. There's been some, thank you, Lord. He came back. There's been like some pressure of, a lot of people have been extremely productive during this time. Like they are, cleaning the house and throwing stuff out and starting businesses and making millions of dollars. But that's not everyone. And this is our generation's first pandemic. Unless you were around in 1918 for the swine flu, you have no idea what you're doing, and you have no idea how to handle this or, which way this will go. So I would say another coping skill is to practice self-compassion. You may not build $1 million business in one day or when this is all over, and that's okay. Does not make you a failure. This is all of our first times going through this. Okay. We've never had to be inside because of a virus, or be away from the people that we love because of a virus that we can't get a hold of. So be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself. When you have motivation to get something done, do it, go for it. That's great. But at the same time, don't spend time beating yourself up because you're not getting something done, because that actually is not, it's kind of counterproductive. The time you spend beating yourself up, you can be sitting down and making a plan about how and when you can be productive and what you will accomplish when you are ready to be motivated again. So those are two big things I would say are some ways to cope through this.
Yeah, I think that self-compassion piece is so important. As you said, we've never been through this. You can't compare anything to say, well, I was in a stressful time. It wasn't a pandemic, though. So
no.
It's
not
not
like, well, back in my day, we used to walk through the snow with one sock and a hole in my head. And, well, we don't have anything to compare this to. This is everybody's first time. So, just calm down. And for those people who are making trillions of dollars right now, that's great. Okay. But just don't make other people feel bad if they're not there yet. It's okay.
That is so true.
Can I ask you one question? I've read and I've kind of researched. Like during this period, a lot of people are dealing with grief, losing, their job or losing a loved one. Can you just walk us through the stages of grief and some ways that we can kind of cope with grief?
Yeah. So there's there's two schools of thoughts on that in therapy. There's like a whole like a list of 1 through 7 or something, I think, like that, of like grief, like denial and anger and acceptance and all of that. But then there's another school of thought that says it doesn't really have an order, and it doesn't really have a way that it looks. It's about the way that I would encourage people to deal with grief is to actually grieve. Don't pretend that you're not grieving. Don't pretend that you're not sad about the thing that is hurting you, because when you bury things inside, they can come out at other times unexpectedly and beyond your control in ways you didn't even know. So I would say to process through the emotions that you are feeling, all of them, the good, the bad, the ugly, especially the negative ones. I mean, it's kind of easy to do happy emotions, but you really need to process through your negative ones, because like I said, you don't want them to show up at a later time that you didn't want them to. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't think we talk about grief enough as a society at all. And the kind of the way some people learn to deal with grief is really unhealthy. And sometimes you learn that from when you're small. Like if you have company over and you're crying, sometimes your parents will tell you, you know, go do that in your room and come back, you know. So it teaches us that we shouldn't have negative feelings in public, that we should hide the way we feel, and we should stuff it down and never bring it up. But that's not actually a way to deal with it. You should acknowledge your pain, and it's okay to be grieving right now. A lot of things people don't consider. People think like death, you know, and maybe like a breakup or divorce or something is the only things that count as grief. But a lot of people right now, it may be a part of their anxiety about wanting to get out. They are grieving their previous way of life, because things are so different. And you know, it's summertime. Everybody had plans to be having fun right now. So you might be grieving the way, you know, the trip that you had to cancel this summer, later this year or whatever. And that's valid. It may not be an actual person, but that's still valid, because it's something that you were looking forward to, that you may have put not only energy into, but maybe money too. So, you know, it's okay to grieve those kind of things. If you're quarantining away from, you know, your family and friends like me right now, this is my first baby, and everybody is dying to see her, especially her grandparents. But because it's not safe, we can't. So they're sad that they can't see the grandbaby, and that is not, you know, that's a valid feeling to have, and that's okay. There are people that are literally grieving the death of their loved ones, and that's okay to do too. That's really big. But I want people to understand, just because it's not like, quote, death of a person, that doesn't count as grief. There are plenty of things that count as grief. You lost your job, you lost your way of life, you lost your way of providing for yourself and or your family. That is a tremendous stress and a traumatic thing to experience, you know. So acknowledging that you feel sad, acknowledging what you feel sad about, even if you have to write that down or talk about it out loud or scream or cry or listen to music or talk to someone about it or seek professional help about that, that's okay. There's no shame in that. It's really worth it to process through it than something bad happened to you because you felt like you didn't know what else to do, or you didn't know where else to go, where you had nothing left to live for. Yeah. So processing through it is always a better option.
Thank her so much for being on our live tonight, providing us that information. It was so helpful. Make sure you can go to our page, and we actually have her information there. If you are in Texas and you're looking for a therapist, she is taking virtual visits. So you can go ahead, and if you want to reach out to her, that's only for Texas people. Other resources in terms of finding a therapist, if you just Google find a therapist in my area, I know Psychology Today has a directory where it's really cool. You can just pull it up and you can see all the therapists that are in your area. You can even filter down to who takes your insurance. So any other closing things?
So we really did enjoy Keisha. I just want to reinforce what my beautiful wife just said. It is absolutely okay to seek out therapy. When we look in the scripture and we look in the Bible, we see many of the Bible characters that we lift up, they really experience mental health issues. We can go down the list from Moses to David to Jeremiah to even Paul. They all had mental struggles that they had to deal with. But we just want to encourage you that it's okay to seek help. It's okay to have brothers and sisters that you can go to, and professionals as well, that you can go to and you can express your real and true emotions. And that's why God instituted the community. He instituted the church so we can have that bond with one another, to encourage one another. And that's basically what we're doing tonight. We just want to encourage you and let you know that we're there for you. We're praying for you. We know that this is a tough time. This is a tough season, but we know that God is still able, that God is still